All right. Well, I guess we're going to go ahead and get started on the new year, dealing with the beginning of math analysis. This particular semester, by the college's vernacular, they actually call this semester trigonometry. So the vast majority of this unit is going to be dealing with trigonometry and the study of angles and such. We're going to start with, it's going to be a little bit of an awkward video for me because I am doing this from home. I'm getting my turn to be under quarantine for a few days, and so I'm going to be doing my work from here. This may not be as easy for me to do as normal because this computer doesn't work quite like mine does in my classroom. So anyway, so the very beginning of this is going to be a little bit of just some simple stuff. It really is very simple. It's just the idea of understanding how to deal with angles and how we quantify that information. So rather than having a really long videos, I'm going to make a couple of short videos that hopefully will make good sense to you. And we're going to start off by talking about one of the most simple ways that we deal with angles. And the symbol of a degree is a unit, very much like a metric, like a meter is a unit that was used. And I mean, honestly, people in the rest of the world are very prideful about what they have, but basically they picked a stick and they said, let's call this thing 1. So, there's arbitrary idea that if I decided I wanted this thing right here to be the end all be all, and this is the magic unit upon which everything will be measured, that's what the idea of a metric is. And so long ago, and there's some debate as to where that comes from, but it most likely comes back to a time. My son mocks me about this because I mentioned Babylonian sometimes, but they use base 60 in their numerical system. And so, the number 360 probably lines up a little bit with the idea that they use numbers in 60s, things about the clock, as well as if you think about the lunar calendar, 12 months in a year, 30 days in a month, roughly, you're going to get right in that 360 value. So anyway, it's a fairly arbitrary value. And so anyway, we have this idea of 360 degrees. Now, what happens when you're dealing with things like navigation, we often need to be a little bit more precise. So I was going to show you a little bit of a different numerical system that is used in GPSs and whatnot. It's called degrees, minutes, and seconds. And so I'm going to try to see if I can actually get my camera to work here, but it may be upside down, and it is. So I'm going to flip that over, but then I'll have to flip it back. So anyway, the idea here is that you have 360 degrees, of course. We already know that is a full circle. That's not a big surprise for anybody. But when we deal with what is called DMS, and we'll talk about that over time. It looks like I flipped the other direction now. Interesting. DMS is the idea of degrees, minutes, and seconds. That's what this stands for. Degrees, minutes, seconds. And so the way that we actually deal with that is you might say something is 125 degrees, 14 minutes, and 27 seconds. That should look pretty familiar in terms of its notation based on what we have done using. It's the same symbol we use for feet and inches. So math clearly uses those occasionally to, I'm trying to make that zoom a little bit better. So sorry, I'm on one of those kind of cameras that has a snake arm on it. So So how they have done that is they decided to take a degree, and if you can imagine taking a circle and breaking it up into 360 units, when you're talking about a small circle, that wouldn't be very big, but if you expand that up to a globe, and if you took all those longitudinal lines going up and down, and you divided the Earth into 360 increments, each one of those values, 1/360th of the Earth, is a pretty large number. And so for navigation purposes, we wanted something to be a little bit stronger. So it turns out a minute is the Now that's kind of, so you imagine you divided the Earth into 360 pieces, then you divided each of those into 60 sub increments. That's how much a minute would be. Now, as it turns out, you've probably heard on movies like Hunt for Red October or anything that has some kind of a navigation theme to it, anything on a ship, that you'll hear somebody talk about a knot. Oh, the ship is driving at 25 knots or 14 knots east, or the number of clicks. Well, this is actually 1 minute along a longitudinal line. That's the line coming up and down, is a nautical mile. So 1 minute equals, and that's longitudinally, 1 nautical mile. And that's kind of an interesting thing. It's about 1.15 of the miles that you actually normally deal with. That was really very sorry about that. So that's approximately 1.15 statute miles, which is what we use right now. The street signs and whatnot that you see are called statute miles. And if you go ahead and you take 1/60th of a minute, it's equal to a second, just like this on the clock. So that's kind of nice. So if you were told that we have something that's a 137 degrees, 15 minutes, 27 seconds, then what that would actually equate to is 137 plus 15 out of 60, because remember we said a minute is 1/60th of a degree. I need to make sure I put that symbol back on there. Plus there's 27, and of course now we're going to take this thing and we're going to divide it into 6 places. So as it turns out, this is going to be the number 3,600. So if we poke that into our calculator and we go through that process, we would have something like, let's see if this will show up okay. We've got 137 plus 15 out of 60 plus 27 out of 3,600. And so that would come out as a decimal approximation of 137.2575. Degrees. And this is like the decimal approximation of that particular one. Now, we can kind of go back and forth. That's obviously very, very easy to go from. And so the other direction, it's pretty simple as well. And so we want to go from decimal to DMS. It's not a big deal. So if somebody has a 28.521 degrees, well, let's go ahead and get that as a DMS. And what we're going to start at is we clearly have degrees, that thing right here. Then we're going to take this 0.521 and we're going to multiply it by 60 to find out what portion we have. 0.521 times 60 is 31.26. Now, as such, that means if we have 31.26 minutes, I'm going to take the 0.26 portion left, and 0.26 times 60 is 15.6. That would be 15.6 seconds. So that's how you kind of go back and forth between DMS and decimals, and that shouldn't be too particularly difficult to follow how that works out. And so you'll, in your homework, have just a couple of problems that I'd like you to do where you convert back and forth between decimals and DMS back and forth. Later on, I'll show you how to do that on a calculator, although, in fact, I might as well kind of show you that real quick right now. So let's see if I can actually get this to show up big enough on the screen. So let's see if I can make this go a little higher. Well, as it turns out, on our calculators, did that go upside down? No, that's okay. So there's one right here that you'll see right above angle. And under angle, you'll see the degree sign there. You'll see actually the minute sign right there. You'll see arrow DMS, etc. There's a few other things that we'll look at it at a later time. But if someone had, say, the problem that I did a moment ago, 28.5, and I wanted to go to DMS, I really wish this got a little bit bigger. All I do is type it in and I hit angle. And I go down to number 4, which says, hey, can you please turn that into DMS? And this will give me the degrees, minutes, and seconds with that. Now, going the other way is a little bit trickier, I have to say. So I don't think it's worthwhile. I just do it the real way. But if you wanted to go from DMS to the other, let's say you had 28 degrees, so that's angle 1. And let's say I had 15 minutes, so I have to go to angle 1, 2, there's minutes, plus, let's say 45 seconds. Well, seconds is kind of a weird one. They put it in a strange place. You actually hit second and the plus sign, which is actually where the clock is. Actually, it's not a alpha plus. And that was just kind of a lot to remember, but it just took us back and forth. So again, the degree sign was under angle, the minute sign was under angle, and the second was alpha plus. So that gives you a little bit of an idea. So that actually kind of finishes the first portion of what I wanted to do with you today, just going back and forth between DMS, which is something that is used in navigation. It was used to be a really big deal with GPSs and stuff like that. And so you'll see that here and there. But the next video is going to be something that's far more significant. This first one is just kind of a blip. We aren't going to do a lot with that. So anyway, I'll be back in a few moments.